just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, Brunning, Bruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It is Friday. We are just into week 9 after last night's Thursday night football game. Dennis, the Jets looked like they had been left for dead and then all of a sudden sprung to life with a 21-point second half, 3 passing touchdowns. That has to make us feel better if we were rostering Rodgers or Garrett Wilson or Davante Adams. What did you think of last night's performance? Was this a turning point for the Jets?
So it was a point. I mean, I don't know. They got to do it for a few more weeks. Like, it was great for Cole, who rosters Aaron Rodgers and Garrett Wilson. He was pretty excited when he got up this morning in the show league. So he's like off to a great start. He's trying to make his way back into playoff contention. You know, the chemistry wasn't there in the first half. It was a little bit rough, and Rodgers looked a little iffy. But you know, we know these things take time, even if it is your buddy. And the offense is the team in general, with the change in head coach and the change in offensive play caller and Aaron Rodgers' moodiness. You know, he doesn't like Mike Williams. He's not going to throw to him. And, well, there ain't nobody else but Mike Williams. Okay, now I've got Davante, but is he really ready? I think that getting them – just kind of getting the game under their belt, getting a victory under their belt, they got the ball to the people they needed to. Let's see, how many offensive plays? They had 55 offensive plays, and 36 of them went to Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, and Davante Adams. That's what we like for fantasy football.
Not a bad trio if you need to get the ball to some people. I tell you who's not going to get the ball a lot of Malachi Corley.
You feel for the kid. He was so excited, you know, as somebody who was young once too, I can relate to premature celebration. You know, might have happened a time or two. Luckily for me, I outgrew it. Hopefully he does too. I mean, he looked good on the play. And let me see. They didn't really go back to him, didn't throw him the ball. You know what I didn't know, though? I didn't know that Dynasty Deep Stash darling Kenny Yeboah was still on the team.
I know. It's like they gave like one pass apiece to every tight end under the sun. I think it, you know, I did not think they were going to win, but going in, but I do think it was a positive sign for them. And honestly, looking at their last 8 games, you know, they have the Mercurial Cardinals, and they, you know, you get a nice break because you did Thursday night football. Maybe they want to stay on Thursday nights because I think they played the Jets on a Thursday night earlier, or the Patriots on a Thursday night earlier this year and won that game too. But they got the Cardinals. Then you have kind of the Mercurial transitioning Colts. You have an up and down Seahawks team, a Dolphins team, and a Jaguars team back to back. I don't know what to make of. December 22nd, the Rams could actually be cooking by then. Then you have the Bills, and we know they're pretty good. And then you close with the Dolphins. They're 3-6. They have 8 games left. I think reasonably they would have to win probably at least 6, but more likely 7 to get in. It's not impossible. We've seen Rodgers get on a hot streak before. I'm not ready to say they're there, but
And
at
the
least there's
defense is
more of a
good.
chance.
The defense is good. I mean, I know that the left guard struggled last night before he dislocated his shoulder. But they gave up 8 sacks to that Jets defense, and C.J. Stroud really struggled, but he was under pressure all night. And when you add in the pressure, and then how good their defensive backs can play with Sauce Gardner at L, it wasn't a great game for C.J. Stroud. I would have, he just didn't have time and didn't put the ball in great places. I mean, he tried like hell with Tank Dell.
Well, here's a question for you, though. So only 3 people caught passes last night. Dell, 6 for 126 on 9 targets, not too bad. Robert Woods caught 2 for 44 on 3 targets. Dalton Schultz was surprisingly underwhelming, 3 for 21 on 6 targets, but only three guys catching passes. I know Nico Collins, they're hoping he'll be back next week. Diggs is not coming back. You would have said wide receiver was a big strength for them, but I have not been too impressed the last few weeks with Hutchinson, Mechie, and Woods as that next tier. Are the Texans, at 6-3, want to be a contender? We've seen every other contender in the AFC now go and make some kind of trade and move. Would the Texans be well served to try to look at getting something before next Tuesday?
In my opinion, if they go out and get something, it needs to be a left guard. They need to fortify the offensive line. I love C.J. Stroud, but when he's under pressure like he was last night, he's going to struggle. Now, would some of that been nullified by having Nico Collins, who's played really, really well? Maybe. A couple of those throws, like some of those Mechie targets, just were so far off target because he was under so much pressure. A couple of the throws to Tank Dell, the difference between a 5'8" Tank Dell and a 6'3" Nico Collins maybe turns a couple of those throws into receptions. And then things are a little different. Joe Mixon is grinding it out. 24 carries.
I'm surprised they didn't throw to him a little bit more. He's a decent receiver too. Or Dare Ogunbowale, maybe he got injured.
I don't know. Ogunbowale had 3 targets. He just didn't convert anything. I it was a function of the pressure. He was running for his life. It was with 59 yards rushing for Stroud. I think if you were to do a blind, not blind taste test, but a blind, look at this box score without knowing who it was, you'd have said that was an Anthony Richardson stat line.
Yeah, especially with the 11 for 30 passing.
Yeah, and 59 yards rushing. Yeah. But, Stroud can be very, very, very good. Getting Nico Collins back is going to matter. I think Dell has the ability to be the number 2. I don't think he's not your number 1. And so without Stephon Diggs or Nico Collins, I think that passing game did suffer tremendously on the outside. But getting Collins back, as long as he stays healthy the rest of the way, I think that will allow Hutchinson and Mechie to kind of figure out that wide receiver 3 role there and Robert Woods, the wide receiver 3 role for the Texans. And when you've got Schultz and Collins and Dell and Mixon, that takes off a lot of pressure on those other receivers.
Schultz is the one that I think needs to step up as more of the third option. We saw it last year when he was tight end 10, but we'll see if we can get there now. Well, that's the game that's in the books. We have 2 teams on a bye, the Steelers and the 49ers sitting this one out, which means we have 14 games on Sunday and Monday. That begins with the 3-4 Dallas Cowboys at the 5-3 Atlanta Falcons. The Cowboys, Dennis, are another Texas-based team that is having trouble finding more than one player to get the ball to. CeeDee Lamb had 13 receptions last game against the 49ers. Nobody else doing much on the ground or in the passing game. Can they find a way to get some more people involved?
So they're going up against the Falcons team that is the 8th stingiest with fantasy points to running backs. And the Cowboys are rolling in with Rico Dowdle, Zeke Elliott, and Dalvin Cook. So I don't think that it's coming from the running back position. Jalen Tolbert has flashed some. I think Tolbert will step into the wide receiver 2 role next year. With Cooks being down this year, I think Tolbert has stepped up. But he's a young guy. I think he's in his second year, maybe third. And so he needs to mature into that and develop consistency. It all comes down to Jake Ferguson. Ferguson should be top 12, maybe top 10 this week. Atlanta gives up the 10th most fantasy points to tight ends. And so when you don't have a running game and half of the defensive backfield is focusing on CeeDee Lamb, I think that's going to open up some space there for Jake Ferguson. And maybe even Dak runs a little bit, but I think I would be looking at Ferguson as a tight end 1, and I think I might be okay flexing Jalen Tolbert. I would rather flex Jalen Tolbert than Rico Dowdle.
And you were right. Jalen Tolbert is in year 3. I just looked it up. You noted when we were doing our recap, Bijan Robinson only 1 more carry than Tyler Algier last week, maybe just part of game flow or whatever. But, we've still seen pretty decent fantasy performances from Bijan Robinson. How are you feeling about that split in the backfield?
So if you've been watching the Falcons, you'll notice a trend. If the Falcons are in a close game or playing from behind, it's all Bijan Robinson because he's getting the passes. If they've got a little bit of a lead, then you're going to see it's like they'll split the carries 50-50 and give Bijan 100% of the running back passing down work. And so at the end of the game, you look at the touches and it's like, well, Algier had 10 carries. Robinson had 11 carries, but he had 8 targets as well. So the opportunity share was 19-10. And Bijan is such a dynamic player that he can make that up, even if he only converts, 6 of those or 5 of those 7 receptions. So I like that Algier is getting some. It's keeping Bijan fresh. Yeah, do I want to see Bijan with 20 carries and 6 or 8 targets? I do. This looks like it's going to be one of those games. The Cowboys are giving up the 2nd most fantasy points to running backs, and so I think both of them should get some play. Cowboys are tied with Carolina, giving up. Let's see. I didn't note if it was the most. I think it's pretty close to the most rush yards, 154.6 rush yards per game. So this looks like it's going to be. This is one of those games where the way Darnell Mooney has been playing, you're like, oh, he's been hot and making big plays. But I might be a little bit nervous about Mooney this week because the Cowboys can be run on so hard, and they may just end up, just running it down their throats.
No Micah Parsons this week. No Deron Bland. I don't know why, but I'm taking the Cowboys.
So I preseason picked the Cowboys, but I'm changing it to the Falcons.
Battle in the AFC East, the 2-5 Miami Dolphins at the 6-2 Buffalo Bills. Dennis, now that Tua is back, we saw Achane pick it up a little bit last week, but Mostert also getting quite a bit of work. How are you feeling about that backfield?
So they're pretty even split when they're carrying the ball. I think Mostert's the early down back, and they're also not afraid to let Achane carry the ball on early downs. But Achane gets the bulk of the receiving work. So he's the RB1 there. It's very much a Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier kind of split. It's just that as explosive and good as Bijan is, Achane is more explosive. So we saw last week there's going to be opportunities for Mostert to play the David Montgomery role when they get close and they need, quote unquote, a hammer. The only reason that Mostert at 200 pounds is a hammer back is that Achane weighs 180. So it's some little dudes back there, but they create space and they get teams moving sideways that allows them to open up running lanes. So I think that if I have the choice to start one of them, I'm starting Achane. But I recognize that Achane does get injured because he's small. And Mostert isn't going away. But I would think Achane is a RB1. Mostert's a RB3 with RB2 upside based on touchdown potential.
Meanwhile, for the Bills, they acquired Amari Cooper a couple of weeks ago. He was pretty good his first week, 4 for 66 and a touchdown, only 1 reception for 3 yards, only a couple of targets last week. How are you ranking him?
I got him sitting in the RB3 range, maybe.
Wide receiver.
What's that? Yeah, wide receiver 3 range. The thing that's the best thing going for him right now is the Bills have thrown their highest number of passing yards over the last 2 weeks. So they seem to be transitioning a little bit to a little more pass-heavy offense. Maybe that's because they finally have a real alpha wide receiver. Who knows? Could just be coincidence. But they've got some explosive players with Khalil Shakir and James Cook. Dalton Kincaid is a mismatch at the tight end position. I like the fit with Amari Cooper. He's a professional wide receiver. He's a really good route runner. He's still got pretty good speed. Yeah, he drops a pass here and there, but everybody does in the NFL. I think he's going to be just fine. Like it wouldn't surprise me if he finished the week as wide receiver 12, and it wouldn't surprise me if he finished the week as wide receiver 36.
Yeah, I actually, this is one of the first weeks I moved Shakir above him, but I think if you have Cooper, you're probably still rolling him out. I am taking the Bills at home.
So am I.
Next up, a real barn burner, the 2-6 Las Vegas Raiders at the 3-5 Cincinnati Bengals. Dennis, best receiver that they have left for the Raiders that's not Brock Bowers is Jacoby Myers, kind of a guy that goes a little bit under the radar, but has been a good workhorse back, healthy now. How are you ranking him?
I mean, he's the clear top dog in that receiving core that's not a tight end. So wherever you decide to rank him, he's the one on the team that you're putting the highest. Again, mid to low wide receiver 3 with some low end wide receiver 2 upside. Minshew gets a little squirrely sometimes, and they just fluke their way into some broken plays that make big yardage and score touchdowns. And it is what it is. But the Bengals are in the bottom third in yards and yards and receptions to wide receivers. So they can be had there. They just don't give up a lot of touchdowns to wide receivers. So it wouldn't surprise me to see Myers have, a 7 for 93 kind of game without a touchdown. I like Myers. I prefer him as a flex play. Yeah. But if I have to start him as a wide receiver 3, so be it.
That's kind of where I am, kind of the wide receiver 3-4 bubble there. Meanwhile, the Bengals 3-5, but they are 0-4 at home. They won't have T. Higgins or Zach Moss this week, but can they get their first home win?
Well, they've got Jamar Chase, who's the wide receiver 1, going up against the Raiders, who give up the fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. But it's Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow. So I'm not overly concerned with whether or not there's going to be production from Jamar Chase. The real question will there be production from anybody else? They do give up the 9th most fantasy points to running backs. So if you've been trying to figure out when am I going to be able to hit the Chase Brown game, this might be one you can hit on and get productive. Get with him being a productive player. He's an explosive guy. We've seen him at 5'10", 209. He's got some power. I like Jamar Chase a ton, and so I'm not. I'm still expecting him to be a top 5 wide receiver. This could be a game where Gesicki pops up a little bit. I don't know. I've lost the zest for flexing Andre Iosivas.
He's too touchdown dependent.
Right.
He could get 2 receptions and have them both be touchdowns, or he could get 2 receptions and have 5 yards.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, would I rather start Iosivas at a flex and wide receiver, or would I rather start Tanner Hudson or Drew Sample, who's just as likely?
I'm be curious to see if they can get Jermaine Burton going at all, but I think this could be a good Chase Brown game, especially if Moss misses.
Burton he's had to overcome not off-field stuff like Jameson Williams, but off-field stuff like he was a little bit entitled, I think, when he came in. And I think the administration has said, dog, you're going to need to do some work and earn your way out there.
I am taking the Bengals to get that first home win.
So am I.
Next up, the 4-3 Los Angeles Chargers at the 2-6 Cleveland Browns. It just turns out there are not a lot of great matchups in the morning window. Dennis, J.K. Dobbins had an incredible first 2 weeks. He's been steady but unimpressive since then. Where are you ranking him?
Well, I would argue that he hasn't been steady. He's had some really good games and some really mediocre games. And over the course of the season, it looks a little bit better than it actually has been. That being said, he's going up against a pretty tough Browns defense. Their bottom.
He hasn't had fewer than 8.4 points in any game. He has 2 games over 20, then 8, 9, 18, 9.6, 16.8. I don't think that's
out of 7 games, he's got 3 over 18 and 3 under 10.
Let me look. Yeah, 3 under 10 and 3 over 18.
So, that seems like a little roller coaster to me. But the Browns, while they don't give up a ton of yards on the ground, they are susceptible to rushing touchdowns. So if Herbert can move the ball through the air some, it may be a situation where Dobbins saves his day with a rushing touchdown or 2. It feels like it could be one of those, 16 for 60 kind of rush days with a touchdown.
Yeah, he's kind of an RB3 for me. I guess that's where I feel like he's kind of steadily landed himself. I was surprised with how well he did the first 2 weeks. This is probably more of what I expected the last few. What are you doing with Cedric Tillman? He has been going off the last couple of weeks. Seems to really find something with Jameis too.
Yeah, it's moving him to the wide receiver one role in Cleveland. Jerry Jeudy had it there for the taking, and Cedric Tillman was like, "I don't think so, dog." He's the wide receiver 1 the last 2 weeks. The Browns have thrown 40 plus passes each of the last 2 weeks, and it feels like there's been a philosophy change with Jameis Winston because Jameson can throw the ball. And so whatever's happened there, they're going out. I mean, Elijah Moore is getting some volume, Njoku, and it may open things up for Nick Chubb to do a little bit of work on the ground and be productive there. I'm not expecting a lot out of Chubb the rest of this season, but I think he'll get a little stronger and a little better as each week goes on. It's just that the bar was set so high for him because he was so good that it's hard to – I don't want to say it's hard to watch, but it's hard to know he just doesn't quite have what it was before that injury. So now I think Tillman is a guy that, he's a 6'3" guy big bodied, good speed. A lot of people, they got enamored by Jalen Hyatt's speed coming out of college. It was probably 60-40 or maybe even 65-35. Analysts were like, no, Tillman is the guy you want. Yes, we understand Hyatt was the higher draft pick. Just Tillman is following that Nico Collins arc a little bit.
It doesn't even deserve to be rostered. I am taking the Browns in this one.
I wanted to change it to the Browns, but I as a Browns fan, I want them to have a better draft pick, so I'm taking the Chargers.
Next up, another banger of a matchup: the 2-6 New England Patriots at the 1-6 Tennessee Titans. Dennis, Kayshon Boutte, we've seen him get a little frisky lately. He's still sitting at wide receiver 88 on the season, only averaging 6 points per game. How are you ranking him?
So he's wide receiver 43 over the last 3 weeks, in which he has led the Patriots wide receivers in snaps. They're going against a Tennessee team that gives up the third fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. So I'm not ready to slide him into the lineup yet. I've poked him in there on a couple rebuilds over the last 2 or 3 weeks and just been like, what the hell? We'll see if he goes off. It feels like he is earning a role as the Patriots wide receiver 2 next year. He had a ton of potential going into college, freshman breakout. Is he a guy that's going to be that alpha receiver? I don't think he's going to get there, but I think he's a guy that could be, a wide receiver 3-4 for fantasy for multiple seasons, given how Drake May has looked.
For the Tennessee Titans, no Tyjae Spears again this week. Tony Pollard has actually been pretty steady this season, running back 21, averaging 14.2 points per game. How are you feeling about him?
Dang, I wonder why I didn't write any notes about Tony Pollard. I missed that when I was doing my notes. Pollard's running back 21. He's having a good year. I think that, with no Tyjae Spears, as long as, he was a little bit banged up, so as long as he's healthy, he'll get volume. I don't think Julius Chestnut is a serious threat to him. Will they play Chestnut? Yeah. They'll give Pollard a break. And ultimately, it comes down to the fact that the Titans just aren't a terrific football team on the offensive side of the ball.
I am taking the Titans at home.
I had the Titans, but I'm switching it to the Patriots.
Just a lovely game. The 6-2 Washington Commanders at the 2-6 New York Giants. Dennis, don't look now, but Old Faithful Zach Ertz is tight end 9 on the season. How are you feeling about him?
Man, he's a reliable catch and fall tight end 2 with tight end 1 upside. Some weeks he just doesn't get the volume to be able to pull it off, but if he can get 6 passes for 45 yards, maybe he gets you a touchdown. In tight end premium leagues, that looks a lot better than just regular PPR leagues, but that's a startable tight end.
Yeah, tight end's been all over the map this year, so he's been pretty steady. Tyrone Tracy has been great the last few weeks. Got a concussion at the end of last week. Cleared the protocol. Is expected to play on Sunday, but what are you expecting? Any concerns?
He got what they would call in the old days a slight concussion.
And where Stefania Bell is crying.
Right. Man, he's RB6 over the last 4 weeks. He looks fantastic. His 45-yard touchdown run combined with George Pickens being robbed of those 2 touchdowns cost me my last undefeated team last week.
Bitter party of one.
Bitter party of one. Fucking right it is. Don't forget to put the parental warning on this episode.
I think it's on all of them.
Yeah, the Commanders are giving up the 6th most rushing yards and the most rushing touchdowns to running backs. It could be a game where the Giants can keep up with the Commanders. I don't think they can pull it out and win. I think Tracy will be good for fantasy, and you love that. I initially preseason picked the Giants, but I switched it to the Commanders.
Yeah, I've got the Commanders as well. Yet another barn burner on Sunday in the early window. The 2-6 New Orleans Saints at the 1-7 Carolina Panthers will foul this under. Somebody's got to win.
Right.
Derek Carr is healthy and off the injury report, expected to go. Last time he played against the Panthers, he helped the Saints put up more than 40 points, but that was back in week 1. Can he get this offense going again?
So Carr got injured. Was it in week 5 or was it in week 6?
In week 5, yeah.
I mean, so through 5 weeks, it was the tale of 2 games. QB2 weeks 1 and 2, QB 26 weeks 3 through 5. So now we talked early in the season. We're like, man, he's going to turn into a pumpkin, and he did, but now it's like, is he going to come back? They don't have Jamal Williams, and they don't have who's their other? Yeah, Kendre Miller
or Bubba or Rashid Shaheed.
It looks like it's going to be a very narrow funnel with Olave and
Kamara and Taysom.
Yeah, and hopefully they decide to use Foster Moreau.
Well, since Carr's back, I bet they will, because those guys are the ones that Moreau had much better games when Carr was in there at the beginning of the season. Then,
so I mean, they got to throw it somewhere. I had hope for Spencer Rattler. I did like that they played Rattler over Haener, but clearly they don't have a backup yet at quarterback. They need to develop at least one of those 2 guys into Case Keenum or some shit. So I'm optimistic that Carr will be better than Rattler and Haener. How much will he be week 1 and 2, Derek Carr, or will he be week 3 and 4, Derek Carr? That remains to be seen.
He does get the Panthers. Speaking of the Panthers, Bryce Young's still going to start again in the backfield. Jonathan Brooks has been practicing in full, but Dave Canales said he will not play in week 9. So still Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders for now. Both of those guys have been getting involved. But what do you looking at this backfield after this week, they're going to have to activate Brooks or keep him on IR all season, which doesn't seem likely. How are you feeling about this backfield and approaching this backfield?
I almost feel like it would take quite a leap of faith to have not played Brooks at all and then trade away Chuba Hubbard.
Yeah.
But Miles Sanders has just 2 fewer targets than Chuba Hubbard. So they do trust Sanders in the passing game a little bit. It feels like they may be looking to move Miles. If I'm them, and I'm going to play Brooks this season, then I might try to get something for Miles Sanders. I think they could probably get more out of Chuba, but it also is like, well, how high a draft pick do they want to get? How hard is the administration going to push to make Dave Canales win games? The players play and the coaches coach, and they're not coaching and playing to lose. And when the front office is trying to rebuild and they want better draft capital, sometimes the only way that they can do it is to not activate a Jonathan Brooks or to trade away a Chuba Hubbard that may not be in your long-term plans, and to be able to get better draft capital next year. I don't know. I think Chuba has played really well. He's RB11 on the season. It does feel like he'll drop into the RB2 range the rest of the year, even if Brooks doesn't get activated. And I'm hopeful that Bryce Young keeps showing some improvement.
Can't be worse than he was week 1. I am taking the Saints in this one.
I have changed it to the Saints as well.
Next up, the 5-3 Denver Broncos at the 5-3 Baltimore Ravens. Dennis, don't look now, but Bo Nix actually QB9 on the season. He has been red hot with 21 or more points in 3 of his last 4 games. But he's on the road now against a Ravens team. How are you feeling about Bo Nix?
So this will be a real test for Bo Nix this week, because sitting at QB9, he was moving into must-start territory. So how is he going to hold up against the Ravens? He does have the 6th most rushing yards for a quarterback, and the Ravens are giving up the most passing yards and the most passing touchdowns in the NFL through, 8 weeks, 8 games, 9 weeks, whatever it is. So the Ravens can be had. The question is, has Nix developed enough at the NFL level to be able to take advantage of it? Javante's playing all right. Cortland Sutton's playing all right. Nobody is really moving into that elite status. Is Nix going to be able to continue to elevate them against a really good team? I mean, if looking at both of these teams with 5-3 records, one of them certainly feels a bit like a charade, like there's a wizard behind the curtain. But I like what Nix is doing, and starting 59 or 60 games in college, we've seen what happened, what it did for Brock Purdy. There's no substitute for experience, and that's helping. So if I have him, if you're definitely starting him in Superflex and hoping that he doesn't crap the bed against the Ravens, but the Ravens can be had in the pass game. So I feel I'd probably bench him if it was a 1 QB league and I had a viable backup, but in Superflex, I'm rolling him out and going with it.
I'm definitely not playing him in a 1 QB league. I also don't think he's a must start in Superflex, depending on what your options are. The Broncos have had a very soft schedule. Now they're on the road at Baltimore, on the road at Kansas City, home for Atlanta. We'll see how good Bo Nix really is. For the Ravens, they added Deontay Johnson to the passing game this week. What are you expecting to see from him in a debut? Not a great matchup against the Denver secondary.
I'm not expecting much. I think it's a great football move. NFL, not fantasy. I think it's an upgrade on Rashad Bateman, even though Bateman has been playing at a career best level. To me, it just kind of pushes Zay Flowers into the slot where he's pretty successful. You've still got Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely. I think it really hampers Bateman. I just don't know that it does it this week.
I am taking the Ravens in this one.
So am I.
Now we on to the late window games. The 4-3 Chicago Bears at the 4-4 Arizona Cardinals. Dennis, the Bears have a good trio of receivers, but we haven't always seen them all getting involved. How are you ranking Moore and Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze?
Well, DJ Moore is easily the top dog there, the big bear, if you will. He's Papa Bear. He's sitting at wide receiver 26 on the season. Rome is at wide receiver 66, and Keenan is at wide receiver 77. And even at wide receiver 26, I feel like if Caleb Williams can gain some more consistency, I feel like Moore moves up into that wide receiver 2 range. Part of his issue, I think, is that Caleb does have these poor games, and that really can affect the passing game. Keenan averages about one more target per game than Rome Odunze, but I think Odunze makes up for it with the bigger plays, the higher yardage stuff. So they're both pretty close in the wide receiver 5-6 range. They're flex plays depending on what your other options are. And you're going to have some weeks where they give you, Rome or Keenan might give you a wide receiver 2 game or a wide receiver 3 game. And from your flex spot, you'll take it.
Yeah, that's it. That's how I feel. It kind of flexes more is the only one I feel consistently that I know I'm starting. For the Cardinals, we talked a little bit last week about Marvin Harrison. Been a little bit of an up and down year, but they got him more involved last week. He's up to wide receiver 18 on the season. How are you feeling about him against a pretty decent Bears secondary?
Well, I hope they use him more like they did last week than they did early in the season. Last week, they had him involved in more crossing routes, more intermediate range stuff. Marvin is a little bit DeAndre Hopkins-ish in that he's a bigger guy that's kind of slender, that's not the fastest guy on the field. He's got to develop that my ball, fight for it mentality that DeAndre Hopkins has. But if they can get him involved, if everything's not a go route or a 9 route or some sort of deep post, I think that's better for Marvin, and that gets him involved a little bit easier, and it allows him and Kyler Murray to develop chemistry without having to wait 4 or 5 seconds for the receiver to get 50 yards down the field.
I am taking the Bears in this one.
No, I'm going to take the Cards.
2-6 Jacksonville Jaguars at the 5-2 Philadelphia Eagles. Dennis, it is a tough situation for the Jaguars. Christian Kirk fractured his collarbone, out for the year. Chest injury for Brian Thomas, shoulder injury for Gabe Davis. Both of them are highly questionable. Travis Etienne, a game-time decision. Tank Bigsby, an ankle injury, also a game-time decision. Who steps up for the Jaguars?
There's not a lot of people there. It's, if Brian Thomas is out and Gabe Davis is out, now all of a sudden you're looking at Parker Washington as your wide receiver 1. And that's not great, Bob. I think Ingram is going to be the biggest benefit. And, so Thomas's ribs are because he caught the ball and he landed on it. So it'll come down to pain management. If he can go, they give him a shot so that he doesn't feel the pain right then. It's hard to play wide receiver with one arm. So I'd be a little more concerned about Davis not playing than I would Thomas. But I don't think either one of them are locks to play.
Yeah, I'm looking at their practice report. They both logged limited practices. So did Etienne, who's dealing with a hamstring injury, and Bigsby. So all of them got out there at least for a limited practice, which makes you feel a little better.
Yeah, and so I think Bigsby will grind it out. If Etienne is out, then you've got D'Ernest Johnson playing the passing down role. But Evan Ingram could see 20 targets.
I know, and I also think Brenton Strange may not be a terrible play. Watch, a deep league flex depending on what wide receivers are out, because I feel the same way as you about Parker Washington. Meanwhile, for the Philadelphia Eagles, Dallas Goedert has been ruled out again. Any interest in Grant Calcaterra or just not enough volume?
I was barely interested in Dallas Goedert. I like Calcaterra. I think he's a good receiving tight end. He followed Mark Andrews at Oklahoma, and then he retired in college because of concussions, and he went somewhere else and started playing again. He's an athletic tight end that isn't a terrific blocker. It's A.J. Brown, it's Saquon Barkley, and it's Devonta Smith.
Yeah.
And Jalen Hurts is a ball hog.
There you go. I am taking the Eagles in this one.
So am I.
Next up, the 6-1 Detroit Lions at the 6-2 Green Bay Packers. This is definitely the game of the week. Dennis, last year Sam Laporta was an awesome story, finishing as tight end 1. He's only tight end 17 right now. What are you doing with him?
You know, he's tight end 15 in the last 5, tight end 12 in the last 3. So he's creeping up there. It's like they remembered that they had him. You know, the hard thing is like they just are winning games without throwing the ball. Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery are speaking of ball hogs. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown is when it comes to receiving, he's the number 1 there. I think Laporta is going to be fine, and he's going to keep working his way up the fantasy finishes. He's not you're only starting him based on what you think your options are. And if you've got a different tight end that is already in the top 12, then I'm okay if you bench him. The Packers do give up the 4th most receptions and 5th most yards to tight ends. So it could be a get-right game for Sam Laporta, but I'm a little nervous.
Meanwhile, for the Packers, we don't know if it's going to be Jordan Love or Malik Willis. Love not really practicing, but they've said that doesn't matter. He is listed as questionable. However, all their wide receivers are healthy and off the injury report. That might be the only week this happens since they're playing the Lions. How are you approaching the wide receivers?
Just what they need to have everybody healthy and then throw the ball 13 times. It's Dobbs and Reed. It's Dobbs and Reed at top, or is it Reed and Dobbs at the top? It kind of goes back and forth. The receiving group they have a very defined set of roles. Dobbs is your slot guy. He's going to give you stuff. Reed is an outside guy who's kind of playing the Deebo Samuel thing, end arounds and whatnot. Christian Watson is the big outside fast alpha. And when he's injured, it's Dontavian Wicks out there. And then you've got Bo Melton as your 5 who can step into that slot or into the other role a little bit. So there is a plan for how they're going to use him. I definitely am a lot more comfortable with Jordan Love than I am with Malik Willis. But it's gonna be iffy. I would probably start Reed over Dobbs by a nose. It would be close though.
I agree. I am taking the Lions in this one.
I initially picked the Packers, but I'm switching to the Lions too.
3-4 Los Angeles Rams at the 4-4 Seattle Seahawks. Dennis Puka Nacua had a great week 8. Tweaked his knee yesterday, but is listed as questionable. They said it shouldn't set him back. How are you feeling about him and Cooper Kupp?
I don't believe a word that Sean McVay is saying.
Nacua is either going to go for 200 yards or miss the next 5 weeks. I feel like there's no in between.
There's no in between. Man, it's with the knee popping up, Cooper Kupp, like the thing is that Cooper Kupp is going to do what Cooper Kupp does. It doesn't matter if Puka Nacua is there. The real question is if Nacua is out and you roster Nacua, are you able to get Demarcus Robinson, who's not going to give you Nacua numbers, but at least you've got a hedge that's going to get some play in that late window. What are your options if you've got Nacua? If you're having to count on, only 1:00 game receivers as your backup for Nacua, it's going to be sweating because you're going to be so pissed off when you start. Let me scroll up here.
So the late games, you have the Jaguars, Eagles, Bears, Cardinals, Lions, Packers, Rams, Seahawks. Night game is the Colts and the Vikings, and Monday night is Tampa Bay and Kansas City. So you probably have some, we just talked about those 2 Chicago receivers. If you had Odunze or Keenan Allen, you're probably not thrilled. Colts, who we're going to talk about in a minute, I think could have some options for you, or you YOLO it with one of the Green Bay Packers guys.
But you're going to be so mad if you panic start Jacoby Myers in the early because you don't have any late window players, and so you put Myers in, and then
I might roll the dice. I might roll the dice. For Seattle, no DK Metcalf, no Noah Fant. What are you hoping to see from Ken Walker?
Walker has turned into a surprisingly good receiving back as well as a runner. The Rams give up the 12th most rushing yards and the 11th most fantasy points to running backs. So there's going to be an opportunity for Walker to make some hay. What it'll come down to is if the Rams put up a couple quick touchdowns, then that puts them in a negative game script. So now you're hoping, well, can Walker get those 8 targets like he's had the last couple of weeks? Can Geno generate enough offense without DK Metcalf to be able to keep it a close game? There's some questions. I think if you roster Walker, he's sitting at RB9 on the year. I mean, you're not sitting him. You're going to roll him out there. I feel a lot better if he's my RB2. But if you waited on running back, he's a very good chance he's not.
I am taking the Rams in this one.
So am I.
Sunday Night Football, the 4-4 Indianapolis Colts at the 5-2 Minnesota Vikings. Dennis, we know Joe Flacco is starting for the Colts. All of the Colts receivers are healthy and off the injury report this week. How are you approaching them?
I know that there's a lot of talk about the chemistry between Flacco and Downs. I think that chemistry exists with Pittman too. I would probably start Pittman over Downs because I feel a little better about the touchdown opportunity and I feel a little better about the big play opportunity. But I'm comfortable starting both of them. Probably Pittman is a wide receiver 2-3 and Downs is a flex with wide receiver 3 upside.
Same for me, and I'm not starting Mitchell or Pierce. I think Pierce really benefited from when Downs was out and getting a few YOLO balls from Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, because, I mean, they still have Jonathan Taylor, who's going to get his 20 carries.
Meanwhile, for the Vikings, Aaron Jones has really solidified their backfield. Running back 15 on the season. What are you expecting from him here?
So the Colts give up a lot of yards to running backs, the third most in the NFL, but they're stingy with the touchdowns. So because they don't give up the touchdowns, they don't give up as many fantasy points either. Now, Jones is good in the receiving game. To me, it kind of rolls like he's probably a running back 2, which he's sitting at running back 15. I don't know if that's probably his ceiling for this week, because I think he would have to get touchdowns to get there. But could he catch 6 or 7 passes? Sure. Could he? We've seen it before from Jones. And so if he finishes the wide receiver or running back 7, I wouldn't be surprised, but he's probably more in the running back 20 range this week.
I am taking the I think I forgot to ask about the Vikings. Oh no, that was the Vikings. I am taking the Vikings in this one.
Goal. Me too.
Monday Night Football, the 4-4 Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the only undefeated team, the 7-0 Kansas City Chiefs. Dennis, a couple of weeks ago, we were told it would be something of a 3-man committee in Tampa Bay with Rachaad White, Bucky Irving, and Sean Tucker. Turns out that feels like a lie. Sean Tucker, less than 5 fantasy points in each of the last 2 games. Irving and Rachaad White sitting at running back 25 and 26 on the season. Each of them has had 15 or more fantasy points in each of the last 2 games. How are you approaching this Tampa Bay backfield?
With my eyes wide open. So Rachaad White, phenomenal passing down back. He's going to catch a lot of passes, especially with Godwin and Evans out. So White and Cade Otton are focal points of the passing game. But Bucky Irving is the running back you want. He's going to get the most carries. Sean Tucker is a handcuff. Luckily for us, they didn't get so enamored with him that they're like, oh, we got to split the carries 3 ways. We know Bucky will probably carry the ball 14 times and get a couple targets. White will probably get 7 to 10 targets, carry the ball a few times, and then Tucker will get a few snaps to kind of give people a break here or there. I think that you know, sitting at that right on the verge of being RB2s, that feels like where they're going to be, especially with the struggles I think they're going to have against the Kansas City defense and Baker not having the big time passing weapons. You know, could McMillan or, you know, Sterling Shepard or whoever the hell else is there at wide receiver. I can't remember the other cat's name, Tyler something, I think.
They have Trey Palmer.
Trey Palmer, that's who I'm trying
and
to
they
think.
have Raheem Jarrett.
Oh, yeah, and Jarrett. Could a couple of those guys kind of pop up and play really well and play above their expectations? Sure, but I'm not counting on it.
Yeah, the ones that I like for the Buccaneers besides Baker is those two backs and Cade Otton. Those are kind of the guys that I have the most confidence in. The Chiefs, their offense has not been pretty at times, but they have done enough to be the only undefeated team. Do you think they'll stay that way on Monday night?
I think they will. I mean, they're focused on the Super Bowl. They're not worried about, oh, we need to win pretty. Their defense is the best that they've had, I think, since Andy Reid has been in Kansas City. The defense is lights out. DeAndre Hopkins gives them a legitimate, though aging, stud wide receiver. Travis Kelce's playing better. We're getting closer to Isaiah Pacheco coming back. Kareem Hunt has been serviceable. Xavier Worthy provides that over-the-top deep threat. So they have a nice mix. The defense is 5th overall, 11th versus the pass, and 2nd versus the run. That doesn't look good for Kansas or for Tampa Bay. For fantasy, the downside, Mahomes is just QB 21 on the year.
More interceptions than touchdowns.
Kelce is tight end 7, Hunt's RB 19 since he took over in week 4. I don't think that if Mahomes throws 20 touchdowns and 30 interceptions this year and they win the Super Bowl, I don't think he cares one bit. I don't think he cares if he throws for 3,500 yards. He's just going to keep on winning, go to the Super Bowl, ride the defense.
I think they'll get some of the turnovers in check. I'm also taking the Chiefs. I think they'll go to 8 now.
Yeah.
Well, that'll do it for us this week. We'll be back on Tuesday with a look back at all of the Week 9 games. But Dennis, if people have a long, lonely Saturday ahead of them, what can they do to fill that time?
If they're anything like me and they got to figure out how to make their lawnmower mulch instead of blow leaves out the side, they can pop those headphones in, go to their favorite podcast platform, type in the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast, hit that subscribe, hit that like, leave us a rating and review, and listen to our vast, when I say vast, we're what, 700 episodes we've done. Probably wouldn't go listen to some of those early ones because like we weren't, it was a little rough then, but you know, we're a lot smoother nowadays.
I don't know. We have a few mix-ins where Matt and I talk Game of Thrones, you know, so if you're catching up a decade behind, you know, you might enjoy that. That'll do it for us today. Hope you guys have a wonderful weekend and Week 9 treats you well for fantasy. We will see you guys on Tuesday.